pretty dangerous to be out there in ice fog and the wind. Like the wind is not too bad, but what you have to be worried about is the fog, because it you could drive off the cliff anywhere. My name's Edwin Gordon. I'm 29 years old. I'm from Aklavik. Well, growing up here is I know it's special to a lot of people. There's a lot of help, and everybody's not scared to help one another around here, and there's lots of volunteers, and if you ever needed help with anything, like there's a lot of people that's there. My family, we used to go out to Shingle Point and spend time out there, and our family used to haul wood like as a family, and on the weekends or school days, and do a lot of hunting together. And growing up, yeah, springtime come around, we'd all be out, our whole family, and hunting muskrats and beavers, ducks. Well, my dad, he took us out growing up, and I spent a lot of time out there with my dad and with a lot of friends and family. Yeah, growing up, you wouldn't have to ask anybody to go. They'll just call you and say, "You ready to go? Well, let's go." I used to go hunting a lot with a lot of people, and I still do today. Like my older friends there, they're a few years older than me. They'll call me and ask me to go hunting the day before, and so I'd be ready to go next day. Like just get up, have a coffee, a breakfast, and out the door, and we'd be gone a couple of days at a time. Yeah, I was probably 15. We'd be out caribou hunting or muskrat hunting, and do a lot of geese hunting in the spring, and we'd say we're going to do a quick trip, and a quick trip is 3-4 days. Last week I was hunting caribou, and it was pretty warm out, and made the day a whole lot easier, and there was no fog like every other time there's ice fog. But last week was pretty good hunting. I ran into probably 2,000 caribou, and but they're pretty wild, like the wolves. There's a lot of wolves around, so the caribou, as soon as they see you or hear something, they're out running. Yeah, a lot of people that, you know, nowadays you just text or call somebody and say, well, the caribou is over here and these wolves are over here, and like a lot of people would come up to your house, you know, and they'll ask you where the caribou are and how is the weather, and is the caribou wild, is there a lot of wolves around. A lot of younger people are learning now not to try and chase the caribou, and a lot of the older people talking with the younger people nowadays and saying, please don't chase the caribou, and you know, all you have to do is drive slowly towards them. The cost to meat, like if you were to go to the store, you'd walk out with, you know, if you spend $500, it's maybe 3 bags of food, you know. There's a lot of more younger people that are going hunting nowadays. Like their parents taught them before, and with the cost of food and everything, like we're doing a lot of more hunting. The caribou's back now. They haven't been here for 2 years, so a lot of people are going out, like the younger ones, you know. There's a lot of people like willing to help, you know, like if you didn't have a skidoo, you know, a lot of elders can't get out and hunt anymore, and no hesitation, there's a lot of help. Like a lot of people don't own a skidoo here or a boat, so they'll lend you their machine to go out and, you know, to hunt for yourself and them. And the meat, you know, there's a caribou hunt for the Aklavik, and that's, I think, it's been doing really well. The caribou hunt, it's a community hunt, and the HTC and the ACC, I think, in Inuvialuit got along with providing, I think, $250 worth of gas or something like that, a voucher. And it's been happening for a few years now, and like a lot of people have been going out, and they don't just get caribou for the community, but for themselves and the community. Like a lot of elders are really happy, and like a lot of single mothers and people that, you know, that can't go out. Like I did a few community hunts. I think I got 15 caribou one day. It's not a bunch of hunters. It's some people like go as a group. Some people go two at a time. You know, like it's all depends on the weather. Like we will have to always wait on the weather. If it's foggy, like we can't go nowhere. But my hunt, when I did my community hunt, I had one of my friends there, and we went up 10 o'clock in the morning. We went back till 5 in the evening. It was a good trip. We had bumped into, I don't know, maybe 500 caribou, and we had 15 out of that bunch, and it was a pretty cold day. It was minus 45 about, and we try to work with the caribou as quick as we can because you don't have gloves or anything on, so you're standing there gutting the caribou with your bare hands and your knife, and the blood helps out quite a bit, you know, warm blood, and you take the guts out and check the liver, see if it's good. You take the liver and you know, all the stuff that the elders taught you how to take, like the Bible and sausage and that, and you do that with all the caribou, and you start to load your sled and you tie it down, and then there's a house about half an hour up in the hills. We stopped by there and we made a fire and had a coffee and warmed up. We don't know who owns the house, but everybody in town uses it, and people out of town use it, and it's, everybody knows where it is, and there's a stove, there's wood, you know, if you need it to make a fire. There's a couple of beds. Yeah, a little while back, my buddy there, he got sick out of nowhere coming back from hunting caribou, and he got nauseous and he was weak, so they had to make a fire there, and they stayed there probably 5 hours and waited till he was better to drive home, even though it might seem close, but you know, it's a long ways if you have a lot of caribou to come home with. So, well, the weather, like, you could leave and it'll be nice and calm, and like out of nowhere the fog and the wind could come, and like I was up there in November, and it was really nice and bright, and you could see the fog and that coming, but that was a long ways back. And then you're gutting your caribou and you're loading your sled and you're starting your way home, and you get into a whiteout, that fog and wind comes, and so you're stuck there until the wind dies or the fog lifts. So it's pretty dangerous to be out there in ice, fog, and the wind. Like, the wind is not too bad, but what you have to be worried about is the fog, because it you could drive off the cliff anywhere if you're not, you know, watching where you're going. There's a lot of rocks up there, and if you were to drive and you'd have a skidoo accident, it's pretty dangerous if you were to wipe out up there, like in the high Rocky Mountain areas and the high ridges, because you're a long ways from home if you think about it, and you're traveling alone, and you hit a rock on your skidoo, and you know, on your rail, or if you were to break anything on your skidoo, you'd have to come up with some way to fix your machine up there. And like, I had an accident at West Channel. Something happened with the tunnel on the skidoo. I hit a rock, and it was a long ways to come home. I was driving 20 kilometers, probably about an hour's drive back in the hills there, and to get to the bottom of West Channel it took an hour. I left here maybe 12 o'clock and I took off on the skidoo to West Channel, and there's a lot of hunters, and I bumped into probably 15 hunters that day, and a few of them stopped at me and they were telling me where the caribou were and which way they were heading. And there's two big creeks you got to cross to go to the caribou, and one is John Cross Creek. It's not too bad, and then there's one at Buck Stores. Yeah, and it's a fairly steep creek. Right now it's like there's a lot of snow, which helps out, go down into the creek. So that, like up in the hills, it's kind of, compact, hard snow, but once you get to the creek, it's kind of like it's just powder. And right now, which is good, because if you're coming down that big creek with a load of caribou, it helps you kind of slow down, I guess, to go down the hill. It's a fairly steep creek. It's not just a straight down creek. There's some places where it's kind of like a platform or like a flat area, and there's some places where there's some pretty big rocks when you're going down into that creek, and it's deep snow, and then there's a bunch of willows, and if you're unexperienced, going down into that creek to go into the other side, and you go off the trail, and you get stuck, and if you're to be alone, that's a lot of work, like coming back alone with caribou. Like I had to go one by one, because I went off the trail quite a bit of times, and I had a 900 ace, and I was having trouble going back and forth, just with one caribou. And well, before I started to cross the creek is when I hit the rock with the skidoo. So going back to the creek, I had to take my time, and I was worried about the skidoo because it was making some pretty loud noises underneath. And I was a long ways back, and I didn't want to leave the caribou behind, so I had to go one by one, back and forth through the creek and climb up to the other side, go down, and then bring the caribou up and go all the way back. And I did 3 trips, and to some people, like, there's a lot of places you could go which is easier, but where I was a long ways from the easier way to cross the creek. And well, for me, like, I knew where I was, and I knew what the problem was, and all I could do was grab a rock and try to straighten that piece out from having it to rip the track. And I was a long ways back, and I could see Aklavik lights pretty good, and the trucks down on the ice road there in the West Channel, I could see them, and I'm pretty sure they could see me. I was on a pretty high hill, and for me, like, I wasn't worried because there's a big deep creek there. I could make a shelter with my sled, and there's lots of willows, lots of dry willows. I could, if I happened to get stuck or anything, and I could have made a fire, and I had caribou, so I wasn't too worried about that. I was just worried, I had a skidoo problem, and it was a long ways back. Like, it would have took me hours to get back to the bottom. 20 kilometers from where I was, to drive that slow with only 3 caribou in the sled. And I never drove to Aklavik from where I was. I drove down to West Channel, and there was my buddy waiting for me in the truck. They were just gonna come up and search for me. They were because I was gone so long. I was gone maybe just about 4 hours, and they're getting worried because I took off in the daylight, and I was going back down to West Channel, and it got pretty cold up there. The wind picked up, and so I sat in a truck. After a while, it took maybe about an hour to get to the bottom of the hill, and I had a pretty big red spot right here. It wasn't frozen. I checked right away. It wasn't frozen, and they were wondering how come I took so long, and flipped the skidoo over, and I showed them, I hit a pretty big rock, and so they were worried about me, and it was getting dark. It was getting late. It was.
You were worried about the caribou.
Yeah. I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about the caribou to get home. When you're going hunting, you don't want to go alone. If anything were to happen, if your skidoo to break down, and at least you'd have somebody to take you home, and or if you were to get stuck in an icy creek somewhere and having trouble to get out, it's always good to travel in a pair because of that. And this fall I was traveling with my nephew, and we had a skidoo, and I ended up we didn't see a big. It didn't look like any water there, like just grass, and it was like a sinkhole. And I was driving back from behind Below River down in the North Slope area, and we're coming back, and I was ahead of him and on my skidoo, and I wasn't watching where I was going, and I looked ahead, and there's a little dip. It wasn't too big, maybe about 10 foot, and I went through quite a bit of them like that, and I wasn't thinking, and I was looking around to see if there was any more caribou, and I hit that hole, and I couldn't, my skidoo lost power. The water went onto the belt, so, and it turned out to be a pretty deep sinkhole, and so I shut my skidoo off, and I tried to get off fast enough to try and swing it out of there, and fast as I got in there, I was sinking with my skidoo, so we were there probably 3 hours trying to get my skidoo out. It sunk right into the handlebars, so we were in there. We lifted it up, put one ski under the sled, and kept trying to roll it over and over, and as much as we tried, it kept getting caught in the grass, with all the roots, and so we were trying to tip it over and over and over. Finally, about 3 hours later, we finally got it out, and we're tired, and
were you guys wet?
We were wet, yeah. It was fall time, and sun was going down, and so we were sitting there with our headlight, and took the engine out and drained it out, poured gas down the engine, and cranked on it for a while, and had the plugs out, and we're cranking, getting all the water, and made sure nothing else was in there, and it took us probably a good hour to get it running. And once we got it running, we drove down to the boat and loaded the caribou in and left the skidoos there overnight, and we drove back to camp, and we were pretty tired, so we had something to eat because we haven't ate for a while, so we had something to eat and dried off our clothes and had a good rest. And the next morning we got up and we decided to go again and to look for some more caribou, and we end up getting maybe 4 more caribou each, and we both got stuck. I don't know how many times you know, in the creeks. That's one of the other reasons too, never to travel alone, because there's a lot of creeks you have to cross, you know, and a lot of muskeg into the deep water areas. So it's pretty hard to travel alone because you would get stuck a lot, you know, to cross some creeks. In the springtime though, there's a lot more water and unpredictable nowadays, like the ice, you know, it might look good, but there's a lot of candle ice nowadays and very brittle, and there's a lot of more open creeks and opening up sooner. Yeah, due to warmer weather, yeah. A lot of us hunters, you know, we watch, you know, like this creek's opening up sooner, so we try not to go by there, or, you know, if you're going by there, you know, it's opens up quicker, you just skip a little ways and then you're onto the ground or onto the ice. And I know one place in Fish River there, we had to cross a long ways to cross into from water to ice, and just before you have to cross, it had a big opening, you know, in the ice, and if you were to hit that, you know, with your ski or your ski under the water, you know, you're gonna hit that and you're gonna flip your canoe. And if you were to drop through the ice, you know, going through the creek and unexpectedly drop, you know, and you're dropping into a lot of water there. So a lot of people nowadays, like the younger people, hang out with mechanics, and you know, they're learning from them, and there's a lot of young mechanics, so if anything to happen, like at least, you know, they know, you know, from experience from the other people that's been teaching them, you know, even their parents taught them. And like I had a motor problem on my boat a few years back, and I was kind of worried, and then it came, you know, it all came back to me. And you know, my dad taught me how to, you know, this is the water pump and it's probably gonna go, here's the spare part for it, and we fixed that. Like we were stuck probably 3 hours before it kicked in. It took about 3 hours to remember, you know, which parts went where, and like a skidoo problem I had in the fall time also, the piston, something dropped in and you could hear it. So you know, you always have tools with you when you're traveling, even though it's just a small toolbox, yeah. And the basic tools, like 3/4 inch socket and 9/16 1/2 inch number 10 flathead screwdriver, some extra starting rope, and maybe some gas line, antifreeze and stuff like that. There was 4 of us in total, and we all know how to work on machines and stuff, and it came down to a motor though, and on the boat, and you know, and we all forgot, and it took us a while to remember. Like my dad taught me how to take the whole thing apart, and because it happened before, and so I had a toolbox with me, and he gave me the spare part, you know, he said it's going, and so he said just go until it, you know, till it breaks. So it went, because we knew it was going, he had the extra part, and we were sitting there wondering, you know, what's wrong with it, and then took us a while to figure it out, and it was like a big relief, like because we found out the problem and we changed it within 20 minutes. Growing up, like we would travel with my dad in older days, like in the early 2000s and 90s. We'd be traveling a lot in the springtime and the fall time. We'd take us hunting and go caribou hunting or go to Shingle Point, you know, spend a month there or 2, and we'd set a net and we'd there's a place called Running River, and we'd go and haul water, on a daily basis or a weekly basis, depending on how much water you use. Like a lot of that, my dad, showed us growing up, and, caribou hunting. He taught us a lot about caribou hunting, and it took us out quite a bit growing up, until we're probably about 16, until he started letting us go on our own, our brothers and our sister. And at that time, he's starting to let us go on our own, and he's like, I showed you growing up, and now it's see if you remember, see if you can do it on your own. And a lot of that stuck with us, and stuck with a lot of people nowadays. Like you learn about it as a young age, and you go every year, and you remember where to go. And a lot of it now is changing. Like the rivers are changing, and there's a lot of sandbars now, through the channels. Like there's different routes you're using now, and there's a lot of smaller channels. Like you only use it in the springtime when ice goes due to high water. You could go by there. In the fall time or the summertime, it's like way too low to go by there. So a lot of that my dad showed me, and a lot of friends showed me that. I have four older siblings, 3 older brothers and 1 sister. This spring and this fall I hunted with my older brother, and I haven't hunted with my 2 older brothers yet in a few years. We all been just go when we can, with work and with our families, and it's different nowadays. It's a little bit harder to buy gas and food to go out hunting. If you were to go out hunting for a few days, you'd have to spend easily $1,000 just for that trip. So it's all depends on your size of your motor on your boat. My buddy there, we went half and half on gas, probably $500, and then on top of that we had to buy food, and so
Oil, everything.
you have to make it worth your hunt there. You can't just go a day trip and not see nothing. So you'd be camping to get your caribou, to get it to last till maybe fall time. A lot of more funding for the community hunt. They do support a lot. It would be good if it was more, not just when they get their funding, but if they were to have more funding down the road, if it was how it used to be. It used to be in the fall time they would do a lot of it. In the springtime they would do that for the geese hunt and the caribou hunt even then. If they were to do it more often, it'll help a lot of more people out. It's just tough nowadays, to buy gas on income, with all the bills and everything. So, and food is expensive. So, once you're in town, you would call, one of the HTC board members, at the office, or if it's too late, you message them and say, I just got back to town and I have all this caribou for the community hunt. Who do I see about, bring it to the local freezer, or where do I bring it, who's on the list? And a lot of times you would go and pick up a list. They'll give you a list of names, and you drive around to each house, and you'd bring a whole caribou or just a portion of a caribou, how much they could fit. So most of the time they would take the whole caribou if they have the room for it. And a lot of people don't have much freezer space, or have a big freezer, so they take a few portions of the caribou. So, well, for me, I grew up doing that all my life. It's something that I'll teach my kids one day, and show them what I learned, and show them, this is the way you go when you're traveling down to the coast or up in the hills, and show them how to hunt the caribou or the moose, and belugas and muskrats and that. One day I'll teach my kids that. Right now they're too young to take out on the skidoo. It's a long ways to go out hunting. They ask me, they're starting to talk, and they ask me to go, and it's just a little bit too far for them. If I had 2 skidoos going out with me, I would take them out, and but on the boat I took one of them out with me, and they came up in the hills with me, and they're walking up and surprised me, because I thought they would get tired right away, and they just kept up with me and stayed along my side, and they enjoyed it, and they want to go again. Try to keep the tradition alive, bring your kids out, do a lot of more programs, with the HTC. They had a program a while back, and they're doing Brighter Futures, and a lot of families taking younger people out on the land and spending a few weeks out on the land. If that could happen more, it'd be a lot of more people going out, I think.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Koana kuya naini.